Hi, this will be the first video of a two-part video series discussing on the paper 3 of AS level physics. The reason why I am making this video is that if you analyze marking scheme from various years of paper 3, you will be able to see tremendous similarities in the terms mentioned, the instructions provided. For instance, you can see on plotting the graph, on taking the readings, how the values should be to find the uh, y-intercept or to find the slope. You can see that these instructions are actually the same. So if you follow these generic instructions, and you will not lose any marks on paper 3. To start with, the first question, I'm not even actually discussing any particular question paper. I just want to show you how you are supposed to formulate your answer. For instance, let's say this is some experiment involving the measurement of a distance, probably a height. And you can see this is what you should be very careful about. Hopefully, since it is 20 to 40 centimeter, they are measuring, or you're supposed to measure this length using a meter scale. And you can see that the value is rounded off to the nearest millimeter. The reason why you have to write, instead of like 20 centimeter, 20.0 centimeter, is that you're using a meter scale which has a least count of 0.1 centimeter or 1 millimeter. So even when you are getting like whole value like 20 or 25 or 30, you have to write as 20.0, 25.0, 30.0, like that. Now, in the question paper, they will tell you in what range should you measure your T. And you have to make at least 5 measurements always with the first question. Now, when you take, let's say, 5 or more measurements, if you are doing it without the help of your teacher or supervisor, then you will get full 4 marks. If you are getting one lower than that, then you lose 1 mark and so on. And this range, sometimes it may confuse you. Sometimes it will, a clear instruction will be in question about what range you have to take, let's say height or time or any variable that you are measuring. So these two depends upon a particular question, but this always you have to make 5 or more readings. But this value depends upon, or the range depends upon, or it is specific to a question, a particular question. Now, how you should draw a table, and what values or what are the points that you have to be careful about to get this 8 mark. As you know, the 1C is always going to be an 8 mark question. So 4 you will get if you take it without the help of supervisor and it shows the correct trend. Meaning, like, let's say with in this particular question, I believe it is W and T that you are measuring. So either when you increase W, the T may increase, or when you increase W, T may decrease. That trend has to be visible throughout the readings that you are going to take. And if you are getting any anomalous value, you should repeat for that particular value. Now, when you draw table, you have to be very careful that each column has the appropriate unit. Okay, so if it is W, which is here measured in centimeter, you should write it in centimeter itself. Now, if you're measuring time in seconds, you have to mention the unit. Now, let's say at some point, yeah, as per this particular question, you are supposed to calculate 1 by W. Then you have to write centimeter to the power -1. This column heading has to be on each of the column that you are drawing. Then only you will be able to get this 1 mark. Now, this is very important, which you may often forget, the consistency. Remember, you are using your meter scale, and you get your the least count of the meter scale is 0.1 centimeter. So all the values they have underlined here in all these marking schemes that they have published, all these values must be to nearest 0.1 centimeter. You're not supposed to write 21.1 then 20 just like that. All these values should be of to the nearest 0.1 centimeter. The next is regarding significant figures. Let's say you have, this is important when you have two of these such columns, like let's say you have WT and you have to measure, let's say 1 by W. Okay. So let's say all these values of W had like two significant figures. So obviously when you find 1 by W using calculator, you may get more than two significant figures or three significant figures. So how much or how many significant figures do you have to take in this particular column? So when these reciprocal relations are involved, 1 by W should have the same number of significant figure as that of W or one more than that, and it should be consistent. Then only you will be able to score this 1 mark. Now, this part involves your calculation and you have to be careful. Obviously, you are using calculators, so you are not bound to make any mistakes, hopefully. Now, regarding the graphs, it's a 3-mark question and all these points are important and all these points will be evaluated strictly. The first thing is regarding the axis, and you already know, but it is still seen in some of your papers, even in the mock 2 examination that you had, that some of you forgot to label your axis, which is very important. Okay. Now, the first thing here is that your graph should be more than half in x-axis and in y-axis. For instance, for some reason, the scale that you chose, you got a graph like this. Okay, that does not take the area more than the x-axis that you have chosen. So you will lose your 1 mark here. So choose your axis carefully, choose your scale carefully so that it occupies at least half of the graph in both x and in y. Okay, so how do we like rectify these kind of issues? You can simply choose a different scale for your x-axis, so that let's say this values are magnified and it occupies more than half of the graph in x direction. So you have to use your common sense there and plot accordingly. Then sensible scale must be used. No awkward scales, of course. The axis must, some of you, I have observed this, some of you get almost like a flat graph. So if your value lies, between, or if your value along, this happens when the values in y-axis lie so close to each other. So you have to basically zoom this out. Now, is it okay to start, or is it necessary to start always your graph from 0, 0? The answer is no, they don't insist on that. Let's say your values are in y-axis are lying somewhere between, I don't know, 40 to 50. Okay. So if you take your scale like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, then your graph will almost be a parallel straight line, which you don't want. So in these cases, you can start your x-axis value from 40. Now the question is, will it change your y-intercept? It will not if, let's say, your y-intercept that you're finding is like a higher value. Okay, that will actually help your graph. If the y-intercept that you're going to find is a value that is lower than the first value that you're taking, then obviously you have to take 10, 20 like that. So if it is an increasing graph, then you should start from 0, 0. But on the other hand, if it is a decreasing graph and somehow your y-axis actually is at the topmost level. Then you can choose to start from a lower value, not necessarily 0, 0. Now, this is very important. Axis must be labeled with the quantity that are being plotted. So here you had time and 1 by W. And in the question paper, they will give you specific instruction on which is to be taken along x-axis, which is to be taken along y-axis. So along with these quantities, you have to mention their unit also. So this will be like centimeter to the power minus 1, and this will be second. You have to label the graph, you have to mention the unit. Okay, then only you will be getting this 1 mark. Now scale marking should be no more than 3 large squares apart, meaning your values has to be closer. Okay, because you are following a particular trend, you're not allowed to have like 2 points like very distant from distant apart, and all other points are like close together. When you plot the graph, all the readings that you have taken should be marked on the graph. The diameter of plotted points must be less than or equal to half a square. So you will have a grid like this. Okay, so your point has to be smaller than half of this square. So I know it goes without saying, sharpen your pencils. Now points must be plotted to accuracy of half a small square in both x-axis and y direction. If you follow these criterion only, you will get this one. Now comes quality. All points in table must be plotted. Then trend must be correct. Either it should be increasing, it should be decreasing. And also remember this, they have given you this particular experiment or devised this experiment in with clear instruction in such a way that you will always get a straight line. Now it must be plot to draw a straight line that within. So here they are giving you the error value. So from the straight line, you can in this particular question, you can go up to only 0.01 centimeter either above or below the straight line. Next is line of best fit, which carries like 1 mark, and all of you know how to draw a line of best fit. Now these points has to be balanced about a straight line. Okay, and these 5 points has to be there, and it should be about either like just below or just above, and your line of best fit has to go through this. Now use your common sense, you can like eliminate, not eliminate, include the points in such a way that maximum number of points lie on this straight line, and if it does not fall on the straight line, then you have to circle it and name it anomalous point. Now regarding gradient, many of you lost mark in the gradient question. The reason being, here in the marking scheme they specifically say the hypotenuse of triangle used must be greater than half the length of the drawn line. You have to show this right angle triangle in your graph, and it should be kept in such a way that it is more than half of the hypotenuse. Now delta y by delta x, you know this, and both read off must be accurate to half square meter. We have already discussed that. Gradient sign on answer matches graph drawn. So you can make silly mistakes here. When you see a line that goes down, you have to have an idea that your gradient is going to be negative. Now if you have an increasing graph, gradient when you calculate, you should get positive. So if you don't have this innate notion about the gradient of the graph, then You should develop on that and check how your graph is aligned and whether your gradient is matching with whatever you have drawn. Now, this is same for like all the marking scheme. After you find the gradient and or intercept, let's say you look at here, here intercept is found and gradient is found. Okay. Now, right after that, 1D is always like this. Candidate's gradient value. Value must not be written as fraction. Here, candidate's gradient, candidate's intercept, value must not be written as fraction. So when you calculate y-intercept and x-intercept, sorry, y-intercept and the slope, you have noticed that the thing that immediately comes after this from any question paper will be some equation. Okay, some equation describing the relation between the quantities that you have just plotted. Okay, so for instance, I'll show you one example. Here in this particular question, the candidate was asked to plot a graph with t along y-axis and 1 by w along x-axis. Now here they have given some unfamiliar equation and the equation looks like this. So this is the quantity that you have plotted in y-axis and 1 by w is what you have plotted in x-axis. So you compare it with the standard equation of a straight line. You get y is equal to mx plus c. Now the m value is whatever you have multiplied with the thing that you have taken along x-axis. So here, instead of m, you have b, which is the gradient or slope of the line. And they have specifically told us using your answer in D3 to determine the value of p. So all you're supposed to do is copy paste whatever answer that you got in your previous section. So whatever value that you got for gradient or intercept, that should be written here. You're not supposed to do any additional calculation or bring any new equation to the table. You just copy it and see this P equals to candidate's gradient or Q equals to candidate's intercept. This is from a totally different question paper. Now, these values should be decimals, not fractions. Now, as for P and Q, here unit carries 1 mark. Okay. Now, one more thing regarding intercept from the previous sub question. Now, if you're not able to find your y-intercept from the graph, you are allowed to use this equation y is equal to mx plus c. So you take 1 point and use the slope intercept form. You can find the intercept from the equation. Now, final calculation, of course, carries like 1 mark or 2 mark, and it should be appropriate to the correct number of significant figures. So that concludes this video, and in the second part we will see the possible errors that you can make in question 2 and how we can rectify those errors. Thank you.